Novak didn't realize she'd made a huge mistake until the elevator doors slid shut behind her, and she was standing in the middle of a marble-floored penthouse that looked like it belonged in a movie. She blinked, clutching the small, carefully wrapped present in both hands. "This isn't apartment 12B, she muttered under her breath, suddenly very aware of the silence, the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the grand piano gleaming in the corner of the massive living room. "Can I help you?" a deep voice asked. Morgan turned so fast she almost dropped the box. A man stood near the kitchen island, tall, broad-shouldered, and barefoot in dark jeans and a gray T-shirt that clung in all the right ways. His hair was tousled like he'd just run a hand through it, and his sharp jawline didn't help her scrambling thoughts. His eyes, a deep steel blue, narrowed slightly as he assessed her. "Oh, I think I'm in the wrong apartment," she breathed. "Clearly," he said, stepping forward. "Unless you're here to rob me with that bow-covered box." Morgan flushed. No, it's a gift for my neighbor, I just moved in." "She's 12B and I must've," she glanced at the gold number on the wall. "Okay, this is definitely not 12B. This is 20B, he said, resting a hand casually on the edge of the counter. "Penthouse floor." Morgan looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. "Oh my God. I must have hit the wrong button." He was quiet for a second, then said, "Well, since you're here, who's the gift for?" "It's just a little something for my neighbor," she said, holding it out awkwardly. "She was really nice when I got lost in the hallway yesterday. I baked her cookies." He looked at the box, then back at her. "You baked cookies for a stranger?" "I'm a baker," she said. "Sort of, I mean I have a side hustle. I work at a bookstore full-time, but I bake for events sometimes. Weddings, birthdays, stuff like that." He nodded, his expression unreadable now. "You're a little far from the bookstore world right now. Seriously, I'll just go," she said quickly, stepping back toward the elevator, heart racing. "Sorry for bothering you. Leave the box," he said suddenly. She paused. "What?" He crossed the room to her in 3 long strides and gently took the box from her hands. "If you give this to your neighbor now, she'll know it's not fresh tomorrow. You said you baked them, right?" Morgan hesitated. "Yeah, last night." "Then give her a new batch tomorrow." "This one stays with me," she laughed, confused. "You actually want it?" "I really do," he said, opening the box and pulling out a cookie. He took a bite, nodded, and looked impressed. "You're talented." She didn't know what to say. "No one in a penthouse like this should be this into homemade cookies." "I'm Morgan, by the way," she said, awkward again. "Morgan Novak." He extended a hand. "Nico Jennings," she blinked. "Wait, Jennings?" "As in Jennings Media Group," he arched a brow. "You know it. Only because my bookstore sells your company's magazines, and your name is on the cover of half of them." "So you're a fan," he teased. "I'm more of a fan of people who don't make me feel like I've wandered into a Bond movie," he chuckled. "Stay, have a coffee." "Since you're already here," she shook her head. "I really should go," and yet she didn't move. There was something magnetic about him. Not just his looks, it was the way he looked at her, like she wasn't just another person in his world, like he was. Curious. "Just 10 minutes, he said, already moving toward the coffee machine. Morgan hesitated, then followed him into the open kitchen. 10 minutes. He made her a cappuccino like he'd done it 1,000 times, and they sat at the marble counter. She told him about her job, her tiny 1-bedroom, how she didn't know a soul in the building, and how she'd gotten lost twice already trying to find the laundry room. In return, he told her about the worst coffee he'd ever had in Istanbul, how he hated fancy parties, and how he'd bought the penthouse mostly for the view. She laughed more than she had in weeks. He was funny, surprisingly down to earth, and when he smiled at her like he wasn't used to smiling at all, her stomach fluttered in ways it hadn't in a long time. When she finally stood to leave, he walked her to the elevator. "This was unexpected," she said. He nodded. "In a good way," she smiled. "In a very good way." As the doors slid shut between them, Nico stood still, holding the cookie box in one hand. He didn't usually care when people accidentally showed up in his life, but this time he cared. The next morning, Morgan knocked on the real 12B with a fresh box of cookies and a racing heart. Nico hadn't texted her, of course he hadn't. She hadn't given him her number, but her brain wouldn't stop replaying his smile, his voice, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered. She shook it off, handed the cookies to her neighbor, and spent the rest of the day at the bookstore trying to forget about the man in the penthouse. But that night, when she got back to her apartment, there was a note under her door. Thick, expensive paper. Her name written in elegant handwriting. "You forgot your cookie box. Come get it. Penthouse." Nico, her heart pounded. She stared at the note for a long time, then reached for her coat. Nico opened the door before she even knocked. "I was starting to think you wouldn't come," he said. "I wasn't going to. But then I realized I want my box back." He stepped aside, letting her in. "You came all this way for a box," she looked up at him. "No, not just for the box," he smiled slowly. And that was the beginning. Morgan stepped into the penthouse again, her fingers clenched around the note. The lights were dimmer this time, casting a soft amber glow across the polished floors. A low jazz record played somewhere in the background, the kind of music that made her feel out of place in her own skin. Nico was in the kitchen again, this time pouring something into a glass, not coffee. "Didn't think you'd actually show," he said without looking up. "I almost didn't," she replied, setting her purse down on the edge of the couch. "But I figured if you went to the trouble of writing a note like that, I should at least see what kind of pen you used." He glanced over with a faint grin. "A Mont Blanc, it was a gift. You want something to drink?" She hesitated. "What is it?" "Scotch, but I've got wine, juice." "Sparkling water if you're feeling wild." "Wine's fine," she said, moving toward the bar. He poured her a glass without asking what kind. She took it, more aware than she wanted to be of the way his fingers brushed hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just stood there, sipping quietly, the air between them charged with something she couldn't name. "So," she said finally, "do you make a habit of baiting women back to your place with cookie tins? Only when they're interesting." "Oh, so I'm interesting now." He leaned back against the counter, watching her. "You walked into the wrong apartment, handed a stranger homemade cookies, and told him you were a part-time baker who can't find the laundry room. That's not boring." She raised an eyebrow. "And you're what?" "Just a bored billionaire looking for entertainment." "I'm not bored," he said, his voice quieter now. "Not tonight." She glanced away. The warmth in her face had nothing to do with the wine. "What do you actually do all day?" she asked, setting the glass down. "Besides run a media empire and judge poor cookie packaging." "I read a lot of things no one should care about," he said. "Approve things I don't always believe in, sit in rooms with people who talk too much and say nothing. That sounds bleak." "It is. That's why I bought this place." "So I could leave all of it at the door." She studied him. "You don't like what you do." "I like the parts that matter, but those parts are few and getting fewer." Morgan didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't used to men like him saying things that felt heavy real. "I thought people like you loved power," she said. "Power's boring when it's predictable." He walked past her then, disappearing down the hallway. She hesitated before following. The hallway was lined with black and white photographs, some cities, some faces, all of them framed like they mattered. He stopped in front of a closed double door. "This is where I actually spend time," he said, pushing it open. It was a library. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined every wall, packed with books of every size and color. A leather armchair sat by the window, a reading lamp beside it, and a throw blanket draped over the side. Morgan stepped inside, slowly turning in place. "You read all of these?" "Most of them," he said. "Some more than once." She pulled a title off the shelf, classic poetry. "Didn't figure you for the sonnet type." "I'm not, but some friends are," she said it back. "You have friends who read poetry?" "Had," he said simply. She turned, facing him. "What happened?" "They died." The words were blunt, but his tone was not. It was quiet, controlled. Like he'd said them before. "I'm sorry," she said. He nodded once, then looked away. "You're the first person I've let in this room." That caught her off guard. "Why?" "Because I don't like pretending in here," he said. "And most people make me pretend." Morgan looked around again. It doesn't feel like the rest of the place. It's not supposed to. She walked to the window and looked out. The city lights stretched in every direction, glittering like they were trying too hard to matter. "You're not what I expected," she said. He stepped beside her, not quite touching. "Neither are you." They stood there, quiet, the moment stretching, then he turned to her. "I want to offer you something." She glanced at him warily. "If it's a private jet, I'm going to need a minute." He smiled faintly. "Not that. A job." She blinked. "A job?" "I'm hosting a charity gala next week. We need a dessert caterer. Ours dropped out. You said you bake for events." Her stomach twisted. "You don't even know if I can do something like that." "I tasted your cookies. I know enough." She shook her head. "This feels like a setup." "It's not. It's a real offer. I'll pay you double what you usually charge." "I don't have a usual charge for billionaires," she said. "Then we'll make one." She stared at him, torn. This wasn't what she expected when she brought cookies to a stranger. "I'll think about it," she said. He nodded. "Good, think fast. It's in 5 days." Morgan didn't answer. Instead, she walked toward the door. As she reached the hallway, he called after her. "You always make a habit of changing people's lives by accident?" She turned slightly. "Maybe." And then she was gone. Morgan stood at her kitchen counter, tapping her fingers against the rim of her coffee mug. The city buzzed beyond the window, but her thoughts were somewhere else entirely. A job. At a billionaire's charity gala. She wasn't sure if she was more stunned by the offer or by the man who'd made it. Nico Jennings had a way of looking at her like she was the only person in a room full of diamonds and chandeliers. That kind of attention, it wasn't normal. Not for her. She opened her laptop, pulled up a blank calendar, and began sketching out a baking schedule. There was no time to hesitate. If she took the job and she hadn't said yes yet, she'd have to prep for at least 100 guests. Maybe more. It was the kind of opportunity bakers dreamed about or feared. A sharp knock echoed from the door. She glanced at the clock. Almost midnight. Her pulse jumped. When she opened the door, Nico stood there holding a sleek black portfolio. "I figured you might need a little more information," he said, stepping inside without waiting. She closed the door behind him. "You could have just sent an email." "I don't send emails after midnight. They're too easy to ignore." He placed the portfolio on her table and opened it. Inside were sketches of the gala layout, photographs of the venue, and a list of confirmed guests. A lot of names she recognized, a few she didn't want to believe were real. "You weren't joking about this being a big deal," she said, flipping through the pages. "It raises money for literacy programs," he said. "We host it every year. Usually at some overpriced rooftop with views and impossible parking." She stopped at the guest list. "There are senators on here, and celebrities, and CEOs, but they're just people. They're not going to want cupcakes, Nico. You don't have to make cupcakes. You make what you're best at." She looked up. "What if what I'm best at isn't what they want?" He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Then they'll learn something new. You don't have to impress them, you just have to be you." She studied his face. "You're really serious about this?" "I don't offer things I don't mean, especially not to you." She paused, unnerved by the softness in his voice. "Why me?" "Because you walked into my life sideways and didn't care who I was. And because your baking reminded me what good things are supposed to taste like." Her breath caught. "You don't even know me." "I know enough, and I want to know more." She closed the portfolio and pushed it slightly toward him. "If I do this, I have to do it my way. No staff breathing down my neck, no corporate kitchen. I bake in my space. I bring what I think fits." He nodded. "That's exactly what I want." A long silence stretched between them. "I'm not used to this," she said quietly, "being looked at like I'm important." "You are." She met his gaze, and for a second the whole world narrowed to just them. Then she cleared her throat and stepped back. "I'll do it." His eyes didn't leave hers. "Good." He turned to go but paused at the door. "There's a fitting tomorrow," he said over his shoulder. "I took the liberty of having a few designers pull some things for you." She blinked. "You what?" "You'll need something for the gala. You didn't think I'd let you walk in there in jeans and flour, did you? I have dresses. Not ones that fit that room." She crossed her arms. "You can't just dress me up like I'm your project." I'm not. I'm giving you armor. He let the door click shut behind him. Morgan stood there for a long time, staring at nothing, armor. She wasn't sure if she wanted to be protected or if she was already starting to feel exposed. The next morning, she found herself standing in front of a boutique on Fifth Avenue with her arms crossed and her nerves on fire. The glass doors opened automatically, revealing a soft white interior and racks of gowns that looked like they belonged in a museum. A woman with platinum hair and a sharp black suit approached her. "Miss Novak?" "That's me," Morgan said, suddenly very aware of her scuffed sneakers. "This way, please." She was ushered into a private dressing room the size of her entire apartment. 3 gowns already hung from a gold bar, each one more extravagant than the last. She turned as a woman with a measuring tape approached her. "We'll do a quick fitting. Mr. Jennings gave us your height, but we'll tailor everything to perfection." Morgan blinked. "He gave you my height. He has a very good memory." She stared at the gowns, unsure whether to laugh or bolt. 2 hours later, she stepped out of the boutique with a garment bag in hand, a pair of heels she wasn't sure she could walk in, and a mind spinning with questions. Back in her apartment, she launched into prep. Her countertops filled with ingredients, her hands moved without hesitation, but her mind was somewhere else back in that penthouse, in the library, in the way Nico had looked at her when she talked. He wasn't just interested in her baking. He was interested in her, and that terrified her more than any gala ever could. 2 nights before the event, she got an actual call from a blocked number. "Hello, you need to come upstairs." She didn't ask who it was. When she arrived, Nico didn't meet her at the door. Instead, she found him in the library, standing by the shelves, holding a photo in his hand. He didn't turn as she entered. "Do you ever wonder why people stop showing up?" he asked. She stepped closer. "What do you mean? People vanish. Friends, lovers, family. One day they're there, the next they're not, and the world keeps spinning like they never mattered." She didn't answer. He turned to her, eyes shadowed. "I lost someone I thought would never leave, and I've spent years pretending I didn't care." Morgan's throat tightened. "But you did." "I still do." She moved to stand beside him. "You don't have to pretend with me." He looked at her then, and something broke between them, sharp and quiet and real. "I don't know how not to," he said. "Then let me help you figure it out." He reached for her hand, and for once she didn't pull away. They stood there, surrounded by pages and silence, holding on to the one thing neither of them had expected, each other. The gala unfolded like a dream dipped in gold. Morgan stood in the service corridor, heart thudding beneath the bodice of a gown that shimmered like dusk. The dress clung like it had been spun for her alone, the final product of a team of stylists who had said little, worked fast, and transformed her into someone she barely recognized in the mirror. But her fingers were still dusted in flour when she arrived at the venue hours earlier, carrying trays of delicate pastries and sugar sculptures no one else had touched. She'd spent the last 3 days in a flurry of sleepless baking, crafting a dessert table that read like a love letter to every childhood memory she'd ever had: burnt sugar tarts, salted caramel chew, slices of almond honey cake that tasted faintly of memory. Now, after all of it, she was expected to walk out there and stand beside a man who turned heads simply by breathing. "Stop thinking," Nico's voice came from behind her. She turned. He wore a midnight black suit, no tie, shirt collar open. He looked like a secret whispered in the dark. "I wasn't thinking," she said, but her voice betrayed her. "Your hands are shaking. I've never served dessert to people whose faces I only ever see in magazines." He stepped closer. "Then don't serve dessert to them, serve it to me." She looked up at him. "You're not nervous," he blinked slowly. "I used to be, before I realized none of them actually matter." "Then why come?" "Because tonight they'll see the only thing that does." She stared at him. "Don't say things like that. I mean every word." A woman with a clipboard appeared, nodding. "They're ready for you, Mr. Jennings, and your guest." Morgan hesitated. "Come with me," Nico said, offering his hand. She took it. The ballroom was a sea of candlelight, crystal chandeliers suspended like floating stars. Conversations stilled as they stepped through the arched foyer. Photographers turned. Cameras flashed, but Morgan could only hear the click of her heels against polished marble, the weight of his hand at the small of her back. Someone whispered her name. She didn't look. They made it to the table near the stage, where servers in tuxedos were already preparing to unveil the dessert spread. The curtain lifted, revealing the display she had built from scratch in her apartment kitchen. Gasps rippled through the room like a quiet wave. A woman in a sapphire gown leaned toward Nico. "Who did these?" He glanced at Morgan. "She did." The woman turned wide eyes toward her. "You're the pastry chef," Morgan nodded, trying not to fidget. Another voice chimed in. "These lemon sugar domes are exquisite." "Who's your distributor?" "I don't have one," Morgan said. "I made them all myself." A man in a velvet dinner jacket looked up from his plate. "You made all this alone?" "Yes," Nico raised his glass, "and she did it in less than 3 days." Someone clapped, then another. And suddenly, the room was applauding. Morgan stood frozen, unsure what to do with the attention until Nico leaned in. "Take a bow," she did, heart hammering. Later, when the speeches began and the dessert table was reduced to crumbs and compliments, she found Nico on the balcony, overlooking the city. He didn't look at her immediately. "You were flawless tonight," he said. "I dropped a spoon in the kitchen and nearly cried." "You didn't show it." She stepped beside him. "You didn't have to do any of this." "I wanted to." "I don't understand why," he turned. "Because I've been surrounded by people who want a piece of me for years." "And then you showed up, offering something without knowing what you were walking into. No expectations, no questions." "I didn't mean to walk into your life." "I know, that's why I trust it," she swallowed. "You said you lost someone. That you stopped letting people in." "I did." "Then why am I here?" "Because you made me want to try again." She couldn't look away from him. "I don't have a penthouse or a media empire. I can't give you the world." "I don't need the world, I need real." "And you're the first thing that's felt real in a long time." Her eyes burned. "I'm not good at this. I don't know how to be someone in your world." "Then don't be someone in my world." He stepped closer, voice low. "Let me be someone in yours." She laughed softly. "You want to bake at 6 in the morning and run deliveries in a borrowed van. If it means being near you, yes." She looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. "You're serious." "I've never been more serious about anything." He pulled something from his pocket, a small, flat box. Not velvet, not dramatic. She opened it. Inside was her cookie tin, polished, repaired. The tiny dent she'd made in the corner was gone. "I had it restored," he said. "Figured if it was the thing that brought you to me, it deserved better." She stared at it, then at him. "You kept it this whole time?" "I didn't want to forget the moment everything started." She stepped into his arms, the city behind them, the night wrapped around them like a secret, and when he kissed her, it wasn't rushed or stolen or heavy with expectation. It was quiet, certain. Like something that had been waiting to happen. The next morning, Morgan returned to her apartment with bare feet and a promise burning in her chest. She opened her inbox to a flood of inquiries. Orders, invitations, praise. But the only message that mattered was on her fridge, a note on the back of a gala menu. "You changed everything. Let me spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget how powerful that is." Nico, 6 months later, she stood in the window of her new storefront, the bakery she never thought she'd own. Financed not by handouts, but by a silent investor who never once asked for credit. The door opened, a bell chimed, and Nico walked in, holding 2 coffees and a single white rose. She grinned. "You're late," she said. "I was trying to find a florist who could match your smile." She laughed and kissed him, her apron dusted in sugar, her world exactly where it was meant to be. He didn't need to buy her an empire. He just needed to believe in what she could build. And he did. Every single day. Nico leaned back in the leather armchair by the bakery window, watching Morgan as she moved between counters. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she piped delicate chocolate ganache onto a stack of tiny hazelnut tarts. Every movement was precise, practiced, confident in a way that made pride curl slow and warm through his chest. She didn't notice him watching. She never did when she was working, he liked that. How she lost herself in creation, how the world quieted around her when she was doing what she loved. He hadn't seen that kind of focus since his early days in business, before the boardrooms, before the headlines. It reminded him what it felt like to build something with your own hands. "You're staring again," she said without turning around. He raised an eyebrow. "You always say that like it's a problem. You make people nervous when you do it," she replied, reaching for a cooling rack. "It's the Jennings glare." "I've never heard it called that. You wouldn't." "You're the one giving it." He stood and crossed to her, placing his hands gently on her waist. "I'm not glaring, I'm admiring. You're distracting. That's intentional." Morgan shook her head but didn't step away. "I have a shipment coming in 15 minutes. Please don't seduce me into forgetting that." He kissed the top of her head. "I'll try to contain myself." She turned in his arms, her expression softening. "You've been here every day this week. I like the coffee. You don't drink coffee. I like the company." She rested her forehead briefly against his. "I don't know how you find time for this." "I make time," he said simply. "You're not something I pencil in between meetings. You have an entire company to run. I also have a partner I believe in." Her eyes searched his, something unspoken flickering behind them. "I've been thinking," she said slowly, "about expanding, not just wholesale or extra seating. I mean something bigger." He pulled back just enough to look at her fully. "Tell me." "There's an old building for lease down the block. High ceilings, natural light, a kitchen space 3 times the size of this one. It could be a second location focused on custom orders and classes. A place where people can learn." "Teaching?" he asked, surprised. "Not just baking," she said. "Confidence, creativity. A lot of people don't get to feel proud of something they make. I want to give them that." He didn't hesitate. "Then let's do it." "I wasn't asking for money." "I know," he said. "I'm offering it. I already owe you too much." "You don't owe me anything, Morgan. I'm not investing in a business. I'm investing in you." Her eyes glistened, but she blinked quickly. "You always know exactly what to say." "That's because I mean it." She took a shaky breath and nodded. "Then I'll do it, but only if I can make you take a baking class." He laughed under his breath. "You want to see me covered in flour? I want to see you try to temper chocolate without losing your mind." "You're dangerous," he murmured, brushing his lips against hers, "and you're in love with me." He pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes. "I am," she smiled. "Good. Because I'm in love with you too." The bell above the door jingled, and the delivery team pushed through with crates of ingredients. Morgan stepped away to sign the invoice, and Nico watched her take charge with the quiet authority she'd grown into since the gala. She didn't need him to carve space for her anymore. She had done it herself. That night they lay tangled in sheets at the penthouse, the windows wide open to the velvet sky. Nico traced lazy shapes along her arm as she rested her head on his chest. "You know what today is?" he asked. She shifted slightly. "Tuesday," he kissed her hair. "1 year since you walked into the wrong apartment." She smiled against his skin. "I didn't walk in. I got kidnapped by a very confusing elevator." "Semantics. You think too much about anniversaries." "I think about things that change my life." Morgan tilted her head up, meeting his gaze. "You want to market with something?" He nodded. "I do." He reached over to the nightstand and pulled out a small velvet box. Morgan's breath caught. He opened it, revealing a ring that shimmered like starlight, elegant, understated but impossibly beautiful. "I don't want to wait for the perfect moment," he said, "because I've already had it. Every day with you is the moment." Her hand trembled as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "You're serious," she whispered. "I've never been more." She kissed him, slow and deep, her hand pressed to his heart. "I guess this makes you my forever taste tester." "Gladly." 6 months later, the second bakery opened with a line stretching around the block. Morgan cut the ribbon wearing a white dress and flour-dusted shoes. Nico stood beside her in rolled-up sleeves, holding a tray of raspberry croissants he'd helped make badly, but with enthusiasm. Inside, students filled the new kitchen, laughter echoing against the tiled walls. Shelves were lined with cookbooks and handwritten recipes. A photo wall near the entrance featured the original cookie tin, framed in glass. Everyone who walked through the doors felt it that this place was built on something real. After the guests cleared out, Morgan leaned against the counter and smiled at Nico across the room. "We did it," she said. He walked over, lifted her onto the marble surface, and kissed her until she forgot the hours and the noise and the ache in her feet. "No," he whispered. "You did it." They stayed that way until the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the bakery floor together. Rooted in love, built on trust, and always rising.